Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for dialing into today's webinar. To introduce myself, first of all, my name is Robyn, and I work here in our customer team at Tessian. My role involves partnering with the amazing organizations that use our technology, so I'm particularly excited to open up today as a chance to learn and hear from one of the clients that we work with directly. So Chris, welcome. Now, before I pass over to Chris to share his insights, I'll just take a quick step back and explain what you can expect to learn more about in today's session. Chris, as all of you will have seen, is CTO at PJT Partners, who are a leading investment bank taking these proactive steps to protect against the kind of risks that we know are just inherent to the modern workplace. Now, Chris's bio speaks for itself. He brings an amazing amount of experience to this topic. But actually, I think what he is fundamentally going to make clear through this session is why human error on email just isn't something his team can afford to overlook and not take steps towards fixing. Chris will talk to you about why these challenges are just so inherently complex. Human beings are not straightforward creatures. And then finally, he will explain steps that are being taken at PJT already to tackle these sorts of risk areas. Although we know in any sort of technology like this, your work's never really over, and we're always iterating, improving, and thinking about how we can advance that setup. So once we have finished Chris's presentation, we're then going to come back together to discuss themes he surfaced, and I'll be passing on a load of questions that we've had submitted to get his insight. But Chris, we are incredibly grateful to have you with us today, and I'm going to pass over to you now to share more. There you go.
Thank you, Robyn. I appreciate you inviting me to come speak. I appreciate Tessian inviting me to come speak. As Robyn said, I'm the CTO of PJT Partners. I arrived there in January of this year. This is exactly how I anticipated starting my career at PJT, is in a global pandemic about 8 weeks after starting. But it has made for an interesting beginning to that process. When I was talking to Tessian about my experience and my history with email and misdirection, there's a story that comes to mind that goes all the way back to the early 2000s. And there was a large deal that was running, and several banks and several clients involved with that deal. And there was an email that went out totally unintentionally, and it landed in a person's inbox that had nothing to do with that deal. It was a individual that wasn't on the client or on any of the banker's side. You can choose to believe this, or you can choose to think of it as urban myth, but one of the companies that was working on that deal, that was part of that deal, was a technology company, and they actually owned the email platform where this email landed. And the bank called up that company and said, could you do us a favor? Could you lift that email out of that inbox? And they did. And that is something that I don't think would happen in today's world, but back in the early 2000s, this is something that could be done. They could tell the mail was never read, and they were able to pluck that email out. When the firm I worked for, Morgan Stanley at that time, heard about that story, they embarked on a program to ensure that that would never happen at Morgan Stanley. And they created a program that was initially deployed to just the investment banking division to protect from email misdirection, but then expanded that program to deliver that across the firm. That is a program that Tessian is something that does that today for other firms. And Morgan Stanley was sort of initial user of how to do that and designer of how they wanted to build that. So I'm going to get into what misdirection of mail means, why it's important, why we care about it at every company, not just a financial institution. And we'll get into how you would implement such a structure for your own firm. So I'm going to start with a Postmaster General quote, a famous Postmaster General. While he may not be contemporary, these words are very contemporary to us. I'm not the first person to have adjusted this quote, but an ounce of data loss prevention is worth a pound of cure. Now, actually, Benjamin Franklin said this around fire prevention, but it works just as well for data loss prevention. It's something that we think is very apropos. And while he may not be contemporary, this is a very contemporary quote for us. So let's stay along the timeline of the early 2000s and I'll ask the audience if they can recognize who this person is. And I won't belabor it. It's Michael New. He was one of the original perpetrators of the Nigerian Prince email scams. These are the emails that went out to individuals to request them to send money in. Fascinating that these email scams persist to this day, and these email scams are still costing $700,000 a year to individuals as they are still falling victim to these types of email scams. Michael New is no longer in the business. The poor guy was subject to his own email scam, and that's why he decided to do this to others, because he fell victim to a romance email scam himself. Moving up to more modern times, these are two new people who have allegedly just been captured in July of this year. They are Nigerian. I'm not picking on them because they're Nigerian. But this is Hush Puppy and Mr. Woodbury. Hush Puppy and Mr. Woodbury have been allegedly, they lived super lavish lifestyles, tons of cars, Lamborghini SUVs. And they, during the COVID crisis, used business email compromise to target companies for $18 million. It's likely they've been doing this for more than a few years, but they have just been recently extradited to the United States and are awaiting trial right now. But instead of talking about these far afield attackers, these people from foreign areas of the world, instead of talking about the people from Latvia or Russia or Armenia or anywhere else in the world, let's talk about these people. Who are these people? These are your well-intentioned people in your workplace. These are not people that you would recognize as being intentionally trying to cause mayhem in your organization. They're the people that are accidentally going to cause mayhem in your organization. So when I get into like the various types of attacks that we can face, the actors are outsiders with intents. That would include Mr. Woodbury and Mr. Hush and Hush Puppy. Target's 2013 data breach, which is still unsolved. They have captured some parts and some people using those credit cards, but that remains unsolved. There are the insiders with intent. Those are the Paige Thompsons who, while working for AWS, exposed personal data of 100 million Capital One customers. But I'm going to focus today, and I'm going to talk a lot more about those people we saw on that last slide. The well-intentioned insider, the model employee, the rainmaker, the person who would never be caught in a phishing campaign or inadvertently sent a mail out. These people are nearly 100% of your workforce. And why do they matter? Like, what is a misdirected mail? And what are we worried about them doing? So when we look at email names, when we look at similar email names, when we look at expired email names, when we think about how autofill works when you're typing out an email, it's going to fill out a name of a person that you may email often. Me personally, I have a couple people internally that I email to. They're both named Brian. The wrong Brian comes up every single time through an autofill. So I have to check to make sure I'm not sending it to the other Brian. And that's just me personally. When we look at it, and you're working with external companies, you have Susie at one company, Susie at home mail, her personal mail, and Susie at the wrong company. Each one of these Susies, it might be 3 different people, it might be 2 people, or it might be 1 person. When we look at sending an email out to her home mail, why is that bad? Well, if you're sending a sensitive piece of information, you don't want that going into a Gmail account. You do not want that going into a personal account. You want that staying between corporate to corporate, and that's very important. Implications of something going wrong in that transaction, if it goes to her personal account, are not really good for your company, nor is it good for Susie. And then if Susie moves company, why would it matter if you send a sensitive piece of information to her old company? Well, her technology department may still be looking at that email. The compliance department may be still looking at that email inbox. And if you are sending something out to her old company, you want to be notified, and you want to try to protect against that happening. That's a hard one to protect against because you might have been sending email to her old company all the time and not to her new company that often. But we want to try and capture those events as well. Wrong attachments. So something like Tessian will help us protect against sending attachments, or if you write in the message, in the body of the message, see the attached. Well, if you don't attach something, it's going to say, did you mean to attach something? But also in the attachment, let's say it's late at night and you're jotting this email out, you want to send out this attachment really quickly, and you go to your file explorer and you pick the first file you see, you think it's the right file, you go to send that file, but actually inside that file is either sensitive or confidential information. Maybe it's for that company or maybe it's for another company. And you want to be questioned before you send it. Is this really the file you meant to send? And that last question, that pause, that permission to send that message is actually really important, because it gives a person a chance to step back and say, oh yeah, I did actually, this is the right attachment, or maybe it's not. I need to double check it. Sensitive and confidential information can go in many different forms. It can be internal memos, it can be unannounced deals. You may be trying to send things out to your spouse to tell them that you're going to be super busy, but if it's properly tagged, you'll have products like Tessian that will flag it and say, did you really mean to send this? Or make people think twice about sending it before they actually send the mail out, and understand that the firm looks at this information as being sensitive. The firm has got a confidential tag on this, and before you send it, think twice. Because once you send something out, it doesn't matter if it's to your best friend or to your spouse, that mail is now in the ether and it can go other places too. And then awkward information. Awkward information is some of the most fun information if you go on the internet and look for awkward emails. But there are 1,000 ways mails can get awkward. You can be using a copy and paste and write the most perfect message at the top of the body, and you're ready to send it, and you have ignored all the drafted information below that you can't see because it's below the fold. And then you send out a message with a mistake in it, or you are added to a mail saying, congratulations on this deal, and it's forwarded 15 times. But somewhere buried in the 15 times that has been forwarded, it talks about how this client was such a pain in the ass. And then you end up sending that mail out, and the client decides to read all 15 forwards and sees that they were notified as being, or they were being considered difficult to work with. So awkward is definitely something you want to avoid. So why does it matter? Why does it matter? Because when you send out this highly sensitive information, whether you're a financial firm, it can include deal information. Whether it's a law firm, it could include privileged and confidential information. If it's a pharmaceutical company, it could include patient records. If it's a movie company, it could include scripts that are not yet released. This isn't just located to regulated businesses. This is something that can happen across the board, and it's something that you need to be aware of no matter what company you work at. And it is something that you want to protect against. There are stricter regulations now. GDPR in the European Union, the California Consumer Privacy Act, will punish companies for non-compliance. The fines just in Europe for human mistake can go as high as 20 million euros. That's not insignificant. That's a very significant sum for a human mistake, and humans do make mistakes. You want to have tools in your firm to protect themselves from sending out messages like this. And when they go out, your trust and reputation is in danger. This can, once a misdirected mail is outside of your firewall, it cannot be recalled. It cannot be, I've had many people come to me and say, hey, I accidentally sent this mail out. Can we get it back? Can we use the recall features? No, recall features will not work once the mail leaves your domain and lands in someone else's. You cannot recall those mails. And that can significantly undermine the confidence that clients have, that shareholders have, and partners in your organization. So you want to get ahead of it. You don't want the mails to go out. You want to do everything you can to prevent them from leaving. It's important to think about how you classify your data, because as you classify your data, you want to, and this is a NIST framework, and it talks a little bit more about the integrity and the availability, which are more on the security terms. But the one I want to really focus is around this top row, around the confidentiality, right? The unauthorized distribution of information that could be expected to have adverse effects on an organization. listen, 90% of the mails that people send are likely innocuous. There's, do you want to have dinner? Do you want to go out to play golf? Do you want to go to a bar and have a drink? Do you want to have a meeting? 90% will fit into a very innocuous category. What you're looking to protect, though, are very sensitive pieces of information. And you want to flag those pieces of information. You want to write confidential on your PowerPoints, on your Word documents, on your Excel files, and ensure that tools like Tessian can then pick them up and say, did you really mean to send this to the place where it's going? And I think that's really important to think about how you classify this information overall so that the tools can help you pick it up and work on that. So what keeps me up at night around this? Well, all of this stuff keeps me up at night. Insiders, hackers, physical loss, portable devices lost, stationary computer loss. But the focus of this presentation really is on this unintended disclosure, not involving hacking, intentional breach or physical loss. It's totally unintentional mistakes being made that people do, and how do we actually get ahead of that? Sensitive information posted publicly, mishandled, or sent to the wrong party via a publishing or online, or sending in an email or text. These are things that we're trying to protect against. These are things that we're looking to control and to provide people with the tools so that they think twice before sending things. So, and how do we do it at PJT? Well, we do use Tessian. So we use Tessian for both inbound and outbound protection in email. Tessian does a great job creating maps of historical names that you commonly email, so it knows who you're talking to all the time. So it allows those mails to go actually through very freely. And then questions mails that when you're sending to someone that it does not recognize or has not seen before. So it flags those mails before you accidentally send them out to the incorrect recipient. It flags mails that contain sensitive information, confidential or sensitive information. And then it flags mails before they go to a person that you've never emailed before. And then it starts building. When you approve that mail to go out, it says, all right, now we know that. But we also use Tessian to do inbound emails. And so when mail comes into the organization and it's sent from a lookalike name, but it's not the same, Tessian will actually flag that for us and say that this does not look like a mail that you typically get or from a person that you typically get it from. It will even say, it looks like it's trying to look like this person, but it's not from the same email address. And I think that that's really important because it gives a person a check, because if they just look at the name will be the same, but it's actually looking deeper into the link to the where the mail came from and saying it's not the same, it's something different. So before you actually activate any of these links, before you read any of this, make sure you know this came from the proper person. Otherwise, you should flag it as inappropriate. That's what we do at PJT, and I'll turn it back to Robyn for Q&A.
Thank you, Chris, for taking us through just such a wealth of different angles. I think that you have to think about through all of this. That's the bit I like the most. As in us at Tessian, we talk about these challenges all day, every day, but it's so interesting to take a step back and actually just think, like, what are all the different elements and fluctuations that are going on in your head when you're trying to think about ways in which you can put technology in place to solve these problems. So first off, thank you so much for walking through. I have a lot of questions, and I'm sure the audience are ready and excited to go through theirs as well. For anyone dialed in who doesn't know Tessian already, what you'll be seeing on the visual at the moment is just a breakdown of the actual platform that we solve. So first off, you'll see on the inbound side, as Chris was talking about, we have our module that's able to protect against spear phishing. And then as we move to the outbound side, as Chris talked about these different areas as well, we have our various kind of elements that can prevent against accidental data loss or data exfiltration, as he spoke about. Now, today, we won't dig into those kind of elements and products in more detail. I think it's interesting to take a step back and have a slightly hierarching view, especially around the kind of problems and the areas that Chris has discussed. Now, Chris, I want to start you off with quite a big one. You've talked about a lot of different ways in which basically humans, who are, your greatest asset to your organization, they're the reason why PJT exists, they're the reason why you're successful as a commercial entity. They're fantastic, but also it's these humans that are bringing you issues and bringing you challenges. when you think about that employee population and the risk being distributed through it, we've talked about kind of controls being in place. Do you treat everyone the same? What do you kind of think about with regards to like who those focus areas should be, and how granular do you have to get?
So that's a great question. First of all, we do treat everyone the same, but there is absolutely higher value targets at organizations that we have to pay more close attention to, and and public figures. And public figures can exist anywhere, but they exist at PJT as well. And so we keep our eyes on them as much as anyone, right? The controls that we put in place, though, they're for the firm, right? And this can be a low-level, a junior banker. This can be someone in the technology organization. This can be someone that is a partner of the firm that can have these problems. And so the controls are put in place to help everybody. And I think that that's really important to understand, because the leak can happen at any level. The story I told at the outset, that actually wasn't done from a senior banker, that was done from a junior banker. They made the mistake, and I think that that when we look at it from a perspective of how we want to approach it, we need to make sure that the controls work across the organization.
Well, that's the inevitable reality, isn't it? Everyone now has to have access to these sort of systems that contain sensitive information, but it doesn't matter if you're, the graduate analyst coming in who's trying to do a project for someone who sits slightly higher up the ladder, or, you're the executive yourself, kind of firing out those messages because of the sort of time pressure you're under. Everyone has the opportunity to touch that piece of information. So everyone needs a, comparable level of protection in order to prevent those mistakes coming through. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. For sure. Interesting. Okay, so where do I want to take this next? I think my next angle again is like, we've spoken a lot about email today, but as we know, the world changed this year. Big kind of events, I'm sure everyone's heard of COVID, to be named, have kicked in and changed the way in which we're having conversations in the workplace. I would love to know from your side, and obviously it's touched every kind of facet of how we run an office in this day and age, what the main themes are with regards to how COVID has, impacted these different risk areas. I've already, started talking about the fact that conversations are digital now, but would love to get your like high level view on how the COVID angle changes everything we've spoken about today.
So things have gone virtual. Things have, so the controls and things that we need in place now, there's a lot more. There's a lot less in-person time. When I talked a lot about the attachments that were going out, often bankers would walk into meetings carrying stacks of attachments, or I should say stacks of documents that are presentation materials. But now that we're all virtual, those things are going out ahead of the meetings. They're going out and they're going out through email. And so, again, we're in a situation where these controls have to even be more in place, more aggressive. They're using a lot more technology than they ever used before. They're doing a lot of phone calls, and phone is great. Phone is very easy. Text is not. Text is not great. Text is not easy, and text is something that we have to figure out and work on. But actually, email being still the lion's share of this communication, that's where we want to actually get our controls in place, and that's what we're looking to protect against. And COVID has created more email. It has created a lot more open channels for people to communicate with.
Yeah. You raise an interesting point, though, I think there, especially around devices and not looking at this through one angle, right? Like, we as individuals email left, right, and center all day, every day. But those emails today are not always done through your computer, done through your laptop. Like, we have lives, we move around. People are trying to remain active at the same time as kind of living these remote lifestyles. How does PJT sort of think about, mobile and those wider devices fitting in? I imagine it's something you have to be fairly cognizant of, and you have different kind of strategies around those devices.
So, so we have a tremendous amount of devices at the firm. They are a key for doing business now. We have moved the chain, and I've been around long enough to watch mobile phones be flip phones and smartphones be BlackBerries. But what we have today now is a very, very efficient device for people to actually do business over, whether it's pulling up a quick video or sending documents. And so I think it's a work in progress. Tessian has actually some really good tools that are in place for this. We're using those tools in pilot right now for misdirected mails. We are evaluating them, and we think that we need to put people through them to protect against the same things that are happening on their desktops and on their Outlook clients and on their other email platforms. But I think it's important. They work a little bit differently, and that is something that we're evaluating how we deploy them and make sure that we get the most out of them. We certainly have situations where people are about to get on planes and they send mails out and they put their planes on airplane mode, they put their phones on airplane mode, and then they don't get responses back, and that can create some problems. We've seen that in various ways at PJT and at other places. So we're trying to figure out how to most effectively use a bounce back server where misdirected mail actually will come back to an iPhone or to a mobile device and then say, yes, I really did mean to send this, and send it out. I think that that's one of the things that we're still investigating at PJT.
Yeah, it's just one of those things, again, is it like you're trying to solve for problems that are being caused by these actors that aren't machine-based, right? They're individuals, they have needs, they have lifestyles. The way in which they go about their day-to-day is reflective of their own individual preferences. And as a result, crafting any of these kind of wider strategies and rules-based systems, like, inevitably needs to be flexible.
Right. And Robyn, it is a situation where 90% of the 95% of the mail that people send is fine. It's really a smaller percentage that we're trying to capture. And that actually, it's a control, and people need to understand it and they need to value it. And then you don't want to be on the other end of that story. You do not want to be on the other end of that story where the control wasn't there, something bad happened, and then someone comes and asks me, why didn't we have a control for this? That is what I don't have.
I think it raises an interesting question, though, doesn't it, around the kind of actual proportion of mail that presents this real risk, right? Because in years gone by, you've been trying to kind of implement rules or DLP strategies that again put a barrier in front of these sort of instances happening. But if you use rules that flag so frequently that employees see them all the time, like, it doesn't matter how many rules you've got in place, ultimately that flag fatigue is going to kick in and no one's really going to take that message seriously. Is flag kind of rate and kind of rate of interruption something that your team take pretty seriously, I'd imagine, before, layering on any of these additional controls?
So first of all, it happens way more frequently than anybody admits. So that is the first point. I think that's very important to know, right? So, okay, so I talked about, not caring about an invitation to dinner, right? But certainly people have come to me and said, I accidentally sent an invitation to dinner to their private inbox. You know what? Not a big deal. However, you admit to me that you send an invitation to dinner by accident to their private email inbox, their personal email inbox, and I worry about that next thing, right? I worry about when that deal or that other piece of sensitive information is going to slip out and go to that private person's inbox. And I think I think that it's not a slippery slope. We really want to keep business communication in the business systems, and that is firm to firm. And those communications are meant to be pristine. And that, I think, we aren't there yet, but that is something that, if you think about it, your devices are much more connected both to your workplace and to your home. Some people use devices that are only workplace devices, and there's a whole benefit to doing that, but then it's a second device that people carry around. And even in those devices, they start adding in personal information. They start adding in personal emails, home numbers, other things, and that as soon as they start doing that, that introduces risk that we have to manage and measure and control. So it is very true that we are looking at this, and it happens all the time.
And it comes back to that kind of point again that you were making around at the beginning, right? Like, humans, or the vast majority of these actors, have no intention to be causing the firm harm. They are, they're trying to do their job. They've got plenty of other pressures going around. They've got too much on their plate to achieve in a day. They're stressed. They're now working from home. They've got a child to look after. And actually all of those kind of factors bubble up and leave open instances that really are not poorly intentioned, whether it was accidentally sending that email too fast, or it was, hey, I think I'm going to send this to my personal Gmail so I can finish it off later this evening. None of those were intending to harm the firm, but my God, when it comes back round and actually that sensitive information left, that person's going to be left feeling pretty exposed, and hopefully on the flip side, grateful if you've got technology in place that stop those sort of things from coming out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great. Well, we're coming up to sort of time now, Chris, but I want to get one more question in, just because I think we've covered a broad range of topics, but it is what you kind of opened up with. So we've talked about outbound risk plenty today around those well-intentioned, well-meaning individuals. But actually, just before you go, I know you've got plenty of kind of insight into this space. I'd love to just get your final thoughts on inbound. We know the challenge is becoming increasingly complex. We know the attacks are becoming increasingly clever. Are you seeing any sort of interesting themes, particularly this year with everything that's been going on? Would just love to understand kind of how PJT have been seeing that space at the moment.
Robyn, I was actually just looking at this week as in preparation for this conversation, and if we just look at the inbound mails, and actually, frankly, Tessian is extraordinarily clever in how it detects this stuff. It will allow a mail from my personal account to come through, and it will not flag it as being inappropriate, which is fascinating, because then it will also say a mail where my name is there, but the email is completely unrecognizable. It will flag it as this is suspicious. And I think that is a really fascinating thing. The amount of suspicious mails that Tessian is flagging for us is actually quite staggering. So there's a lot of mail that's coming in, and I am very, very pleased that we have a tool that helps detect this, that helps us work with our end users. So you can spoof an email address any way, shape, or form, and making sure that you have a product in there that basically says this one mail doesn't look like the others is really helpful. It's very helpful to help our end users. Our end users are using, are recognizing when these messages come through. Our administrators are able to help them work through those situations. Sometimes they are legit, but oftentimes they are not. And I think that has been a very useful thing for us to recognize, and just it will look like the person that sent the mail. It will have enough information in it that Tessian can say it isn't likely coming from this person. And I think that's really important.
Good. Well, obviously, I'm very glad to hear that, but I think we all know just actually how little effort potentially an attacker needs to go to in order to drag, the LinkedIn bio, the context, make a message fairly believable. That actually,
right.
It's pretty amazing. Email is a system.
we use other products. We use other products for quarantine, right? And so yeah, and we quarantine a ton of mail, right? But these are mails that make it through those quarantine processes and still hit the inboxes. And Tessian's the one that picks them up. That's the last line of defense for us.
Well, appreciate it. And we're going to keep doing what we're doing and keep improving it to make sure they don't get through.
Absolutely.
Chris.
Thanks.
I agree. I will wrap it up there today, but I just want to say again, thank you so much for taking the time to walk through, a breadth of different risk areas that you are constantly having circling around your head. I didn't envy that slide when you talked about all the different things that keep you up at night. What I would love everyone who has watched today to come away with is just appreciation for actually having the time to talk to Chris in such depth around, how he's using the tool, hear it directly in their words with regards to, where a technology like Tessian is particularly interesting or useful. So we are so grateful for you for having taken the time, and, love to continue kind of seeing where the tool evolve next and keep us posted on the next risk areas that you need our help with.
Great. Thank you so much.
Lovely. Thank you. We'll sign off there. Thanks, everyone.